Chapter 81. I would like to withdraw from your tutelage. 1. Hongshan Academy, Luxun's classroom. As a star teacher of the academy, his classroom was several hundred meters wide, as big as a massive football field. Students have lined up in rows after rows, and they numbered several hundred. As expected of Lelouch, I have heard rumors outside that innumerable students find it an honor to become your student and they go all out to be admitted under your tutelage. But to think that it would be true. Looking at the number of students in the classroom, an elderly stroked his beard as he looked at a young man not too far away from him. The young man was around 26 to 27-year-old, dressed in blue. He stood upright as though a spear that would pierce through the heavens, carrying a Hautiora with him. As for the elderly, if Shang Bin is here, he would be able to recognize him. He was the master of Hongshan Pavilion. Elder Hong Hao? You have praised me excessively. Elder, I am just fulfilling my responsibility in nurturing them. They have overrated me. The young man chuckled. His words might be humble, but his attitude exuded self-confidence and pride. It is clear to see whether you have been overrated or not just by seeing the standards of the students. I have heard that over 70 of the top 100 students have been admitted into your class after applying for it. Furthermore, of the 200 new students you have accepted, there doesn't seem to be a single one who is placed beneath 500. Elder Hong Hao smiled as he stroked his beard. Yesterday, when he heard the figures, he was also taken aback. Despite being young, this Luxun Lelouch had become the most radiant star teacher in the entire academy. Almost all the good buds among the freshmen had been taken by him. Such results, despite the long history of the academy, was rarely seen. It is my honor for students to be willing to apply for my lessons. Hearing praises from a fighter 7 Dan Elder, Luxun Lelouch swelled in pride, after which, turning around, he asked, Elder Hong Hao has always been a busy figure, so what kind of wind brought you here today? Could it be that you have something that requires my help? As long as it is within the scope of my abilities, I will give it my best. He didn't believe that a powerful elder like him would be here just to chat. Speaking of it, there is indeed something that I need to trouble you with. I have been old friends with your father and I watched as you grew up. I know that you are an upright person, so I came here to request you investigate a teacher for me. Elder Hong Hao said, do not mention my father. He is a stubborn antique. Seeing how the other party was trying to play the emotion card, Luxun frowned. Which teacher do you want me to look into? Zhang Xuan. Elder Hong Hao said, after that incident with Zhang Xuan in his Hongshan tavern, his business was now negligible. Rage had already been burning furiously in his heart. If not in consideration for his identity, he would have already ran up to the dwelling of the other party to bash him up. Zhang Xuan? You mean the one who scored 0 for his teacher qualification examination and sent Zhao Yanfeng's cultivation berserk? Luxun looked over. He had already heard of the various glorious deeds of the Zhang Lelouch. Furthermore, he even accepted a student of his, so how could he not be aware of it? Indeed. Elder Hong Hao nodded his head. He is just a trash of a teacher. He would be fired sooner or later. Does Elder have a grudge with him? Luxun was puzzled. On one hand was an established elder that could vie for the academy's principal position, while on the other, a teacher who could be fired at any moment. The two lived in totally different worlds, so how could they be related to one another? It is just some minor matters. I have heard that the Education Bureau has issued an ultimatum to him. As long as he fails to accept any student this school term, his teaching license will be revoked and he will be expelled from the academy. Thus, I hope to trouble Lelouch to see whether you can accept those students of his under your tutelage. Elder Hong Hao revealed the purpose behind his visit. He had already looked into Zhang Xuan's affairs before heading here, including the fact that he had recruited 5 students this school term. The other party was a teacher and this identity protected him, leaving the elder without a means to deal with him. However, the moment he lost this identity, wouldn't he be his to slaughter? Accept under my tutelage? Luxun didn't expect the other party to look for him over such a matter. Indeed, as the star teacher of Hongshan Academy, you are probably the only one capable of doing so. As long as you reveal such an intention, his few students would most probably withdraw from his lessons and rush to come under you. Elder Hong Hao chuckled. Dealing with a teacher who has students under him is troublesome. If he has no students under him, then things wouldn't be that complicated. Luxun hesitated. There is nothing to hesitate about. Have you forgotten about Zhao Yanfeng? If you allow Zhang Xuan to continue teaching the students like that, history will just repeat itself and the lives of his students will be ruined. You are saving them by bringing them over. Elder Hong Hao immediately gave him another push upon seeing his hesitation. All right, I will help you on this matter. I will reveal my intention to accept the students under his tutelage today. Luxun nodded his head. Great. Elder Hong Hao's eyes lit up and excitement coursed through his heart. Now that Lelouch had agreed to it, he could already clearly vision the disappointed and despairing face of Zhang Xuan. Since he dared to leave Hongshan Pavilion on the verge of closing down, he will slowly play with him and show him what true fear means. Just as he was rejoicing over it in his mind, pondering about what he should do to punish him, a new student rushed over. Lelouch. Upon standing before Luxun, he knelt down. Wang Yan, what is wrong? Seeing this youngster, Luxun smiled and nodded his head. This Wang Yan was one of the few most talented ones of this batch of freshmen. Furthermore, he was the grandson of the second elder of the Wang clan, thus possessing an esteemed position. Even for him, he felt proud to accept a student of such standing. Lelouch, Wang Yan, who just came over from the Enlightenment Will Tower, knelt onto the floor and he appeared to be conflicted. Have you met with some trouble in your cultivation? Free to speak. Seeing him stutter, Luxun spoke grandly. Lelouch's knowledge is vast, not to mention that he is the most famous teacher in the entire academy. If you have any difficulties, feel free to speak of it. He is definitely able to solve it for you. Elder Hong Hao said with a smile as he stroked his beard. All right, I will speak then. Wang Yan clenched his jaws and continued. I would like to withdraw from your tutelage. I hope Lelouch can fulfill my request. Withdraw from my tutelage? Luxun staggered, his eyes widened in disbelief. Other people fought with one another to be admitted under him, and yet this fellow wanted to withdraw from his tutelage? Are you for real? After teaching in Hongshan Academy for numerous years, he had never met with such a situation. Yes. Now that the word was out, Wang Yan heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly nodded his head. Do you have anything that you find hard to speak of, or were you threatened by someone else? Lu Xun couldn't resist asking. No, this is a choice I made of my own free will. Wang Yan said, you know that after withdrawing from my tutelage, no other teachers in this academy will accept you, right? Hearing that he made the choice out of his own free will, Lu Xun continued on. He was the most famous teacher in the academy. How could any other teachers dare to accept a student who withdrew from his tutelage? As long as I withdraw from your tutelage, I would be able to listen in on Zhang Xuan Loxi's lessons. This is an opportunity for me, so I hope Li Loxi can grant my wish. Wang Yan lowered his body. Withdraw from my tutelage to listen in on Zhang Xuan Loxi's lessons? Hearing those words, a constipated expression appeared on Lu Xun with his mouth agape and eyes in perfect circles. He felt as though something had gone wrong with the world. Chapter 82, I would like to withdraw from your tutelage, too. Not just Lu Xun was carrying such an expression, even Elder Hong Hao felt the world spinning around him as he found it difficult to cope with the sudden turn of events. Wasn't Zhang Xuan the worst teacher in the entire academy? Just a moment ago, he said that as long as he were to release word of his interest to accept his students, they would come rushing over. However, never in his dreams would he have expected that even before he could make a move, one of the students he held great expectations for had ran over to him. It is one thing if the other party had accepted you, but to listen in on his lessons? The heck, are you sure you aren't joking with me? That means that you don't have any position at all. Instead of being my direct disciple, you chose to ran over to listen into someone else's lesson. Lu Xun felt as though his face had been slapped hard and his complexion darkened. I hope that Li Loxi can fulfill my request. Wang Yan hurriedly pleaded. After a long period of time, looking at the serious expression on the other party's face, he knew that the other party was serious with an awful expression. He said, you do know that Zhang Xuan Loxi had once caused a student's cultivation to go berserk? Even so, you want to listen into his classes? I am aware of it, but I would still like to. Wang Yan nodded his head, the determination on his face resolute. Just a moment ago, he got a glimpse of Zhang Loxi's amazing capabilities that left even his grandfather in awe at this moment. His heart was already with Zhang Xuan. Seeing how determined the other party was, Lu Xun's complexion darkened even further. Gesturing to the few students by the side, he said, bring Zhao Yanfeng over. Lu Loxi. A short moment later, Zhao Yanfeng arrived. Wang Yan says that he would like to withdraw from my tutelage to listen into Zhang Xuan Loxi's classes. Tell him how it was when you cultivated under him and let him know how foolish his decision is. Lu Xun flung his sleeves. Zhao Yanfeng didn't speak and instead, he knelt down and kowtowed continuously. What's wrong? Didn't you recount the situation frequently in the past? Lu Xun frowned. Zhao Yanfeng, as the student whose cultivation was sent berserk by Zhang Xuan, had the greatest say in the matter in the past. He often spoke badly about Zhang Loxi, only to be stopped by him even though was granting him permission to speak now. He seemed reluctant to do so, as if something was plaguing his mind. Lu Loxi. Actually, just like Wang Yan, I would like to listen in on Zhang Loxi's lessons. Finally solidifying his resolution, Zhao Yanfeng said, you want to go as well? With a steeled face, Lu Xun almost stumbled to the ground. Didn't your cultivation go berserk because of him? Don't you resent him for that? Didn't you talk badly about him often? So why would you want to withdraw from my tutelage to listen in on his lessons? Lu Xun felt that he was on the verge of going insane. Zhang Loxi is my benefactor. I feel extremely guilty for leaving him without bidding farewell the previous time. I hope that Li Loxi can fulfill my wish. Zhao Yanfeng said respectfully. Benefactor? Benefactor your head? By sending your cultivation berserk? Leaving without bidding farewell? It is clear to see that you were trying to escape from him. Alright. Guilty? When you insulted Zhang Xuan Loxi every day, why didn't I see a single trace of guilt in you? Lu Xun felt like going on a frenzy. Alright, since the both of you have made up your minds, I will withdraw you two from my tutelage then. Grabbing the 2 jade tokens over, he bit on his finger and dripped a droplet of fresh blood on the both of them. As the star teacher of the academy, Lu Xun was a proud person since these two students of his have already made up their minds. Stopping them would only make them resentful of him. If so, he might as well simply let go of them. Thank you, teacher. Grabbing over the jade token and confirming that they were withdrawn from Lu Xun Loxi's tutelage, Wang Yan and Zhao Yanfeng's eyes lit up simultaneously. The both of you aren't my students anymore. You can leave now. Suppressing his rage that was on the verge of erupting, Lu Xun waved them away. Yes. The two of them walked out. Damn it, damn it. Upon seeing them leave, Lu Xun roared. Who was he? The #1 star teacher of Hongshan Academy. Countless students vied with one another to become his student and he had to contemplate carefully before making a choice among them. He thought that no one would be able to poach his students in the academy, but, not just one, but 2 students were poached from him in one go. Furthermore, if the one who poached these students from him were Wang Zhao or Shenbairu, he could let this matter drop, but for it to be the one who scored a 0 in his teacher qualification examination, the fellow who stood at the very bottom of the academy. The strong feeling of humiliation he was feeling made him feel frenzied. Not to mention, he had just agreed to Elder Hong Hao's request to poach the other party's students, yet, before he could make a move, the other party had already succeeded in poaching his. If not for his propriety and his concern over his identity, he might even rush over to beat up this Zhang Xuan. Zhong. After venting his anger slightly, the rage Lu Xun felt cooled down slightly. He turned around to call for his student, Lu Loxi. A 16 to 17-year-old youngster walked out. Zhong, the student who was ranked 4th in this year's entrance examination. He was one of the most talented students he had accepted this semester. Even though he was only 16, he had already reached Juxi realm pinnacle and was ready to break into the next realm at any moment. Deliver a war letter to Zhang Xuan Loxi for me. Lu Xun gritted his teeth. War letter? Hearing his decision, Elder Hong was taken aback, after which he came to a realization and asked, could it be that during this freshman tournament, you hope to, indeed, to dare to poach my student? I, Luxun, have never suffered such humiliation. Luxun Loshi waved his hand, then, clenching his fist tightly together, he continued, since he dares to make a move on me, then he should find a way to withstand my rage as well. After which, he retrieved a paper from the desk and wrote on it, pass this to Zhang Xuan, tell him that I will challenge him to a teacher evaluation during the freshman tournament half a month from now. Ask him if he dares to accept my challenge or not. If he dares not, tell him to never do such petty actions behind my back. Luxun flung his sleeves majestically. Every year, half a month after the acceptance of the freshmen, a freshman tournament would be held. This tournament allowed the students to showcase their talents and improvement. It was a stage for the students to show their worth as compared to their peers. As for teacher evaluation, it was a battle between different teachers. During a teacher evaluation, the two competing teachers will choose a few of their students and compete based on their cultivation realm, their battling prowess and theoretical knowledge, so as to ensure the effectiveness of the teachers' classes. Through such competition, the competency of the teachers were being assessed and evaluated. From the eyes of the outsiders, Luxun Loshi proposing the challenge to Zhang Xuan was a one-sided slaughter. Yes. Zihong's eyes twinkled in reverence. The results of teacher evaluation affected the respective teachers' pride and honor as a result. Such challenges were usually held privately. Loshi was probably the only one who was confident and proud enough to send a war letter directly to another teacher face on. As expected of his idol, he was simply too suave, venting his discontentment whenever he is angered, not even needing to suppress his emotions at all. He was his role model. Go. Luxun ushered him. Zihong nodded his head, turned around and left. Do you really intend to hold a teacher challenge? Elder Hong Hao walked over and asked, not only so, I want to hold a bet with him. If he loses, all of the students under his tutelage will go to me. A glint flashed across Luxun's eyes. Ever since he became a teacher, his life had been smooth sailing, just as he intended to make use of these qualifications to attract the attention of a master teacher, so as to rise up to the position of an assistant master teacher. He met with such an affair. If not for such thoughts of his, there was no reason at all for him to accept Zhao Yanfeng, who didn't have a high cultivation realm and had gone berserk once before. After all, he was a teacher, not a Samaritan. If he was truly a good person, he could have just accepted all students who applied for his classes. There's no need to select among them at all. It was all for the fame. He wanted to accrue sufficient reputation to become an assistant master teacher. If others were to hear that his student had withdrawn from his lessons to listen into the class of someone who had scored 0 for the teacher qualification examination, wouldn't his reputation go into the gutters? Thus, no matter what, he had to get back at the one who inflicted such humiliation on him. Chapter 83, The Arrogant Zihong. Will Zhang Loshi be okay? In the classroom, Zhao Ya, Wang Ying and the others were worried. Kaoxun Loshi had applied for the Enlightenment Will trial to deal with Zhang Loshi, even though not many people knew of it yet. As his students, they still heard some news of it. Don't worry, we had been through Zhang Loshi's lessons and we were all impressed with him. Liu Yang is impressed by him, so it is impossible for anything to go wrong. Zheng Yang said. Of the 5 students Zhang Xuan accepted, he was the one who was the most dissatisfied with Zhang Loshi. However, after 2 lessons, he was already thoroughly impressed with him right now. Even if Wang Jia wanted to accept him in, he would reject him flat out. Since this was the case with him, it was bound to be the same with Liu Yang as well. With such level of trust, how could Zhang Xuan fail the test? Boom. In the midst of speaking, someone abruptly sent the metal door flying with a kick from outside, after which, a young man walked in haughtily. Where is your respected Zhang Xuan Loshi? Get him to come out. With both hands behind his back, the young man's eyelids rose slightly as he said those words. He intentionally emphasized on the words Zhang Xuan Loshi. Not only was there not a single trace of respect in his expression, he seemed to be mocking him. Who are you? We don't welcome you here, so please leave. Upon seeing the other party speaking of Zhang Loshi with such disrespect, not to mention that he kicked the door open, Zheng Yang's face darkened. Zheng Yang, don't be rash, he is the one who was ranked 4th in the entrance examinations. Zihong. Recognizing the young man, Yuan Tao's fat body shook as he hurriedly pulled Zheng Yang back and whispered to him in a hushed voice. Zihong? Not just Zheng Yang, even the faces of Zhao Yan and the others darkened. They have heard of this name before. Zihong was reputed to have already reached Juxi realm pinnacle, and it was possible for him to break through into the next realm any moment now. Ranking 4th in the entrance examination, this clearly showed that his strength and talent was something they were unable to match up to. To be able to recognize me, looks like you aren't as dumb as I thought. This is a war letter from Luxun Loshi. He wants to challenge Zhang Xuan Loshi to a teacher evaluation during the freshman tournament half a month later, so, who is going to accept this letter in his stead? Upon seeing the others recognize him, the edges of the young man's lip crept upwards with a condescending look. He spoke contemptuously to them. This person was the one who just walked out of Luxun's classroom, Zihong. He had long heard of Zhang Xuan, the worst teacher in the academy who scored 0 in the teacher qualification examination, as one blessed by the heavens and Luxun's prided student. He looked down on him. Teacher evaluation? Luxun Loshi? In that instant, everyone's faces changed. Even though the ones to compete in the teacher evaluation were them, it was considered as a battle between the teachers' ability to guide their students. This concerned the pride of their teacher, and very few people chose to hold it. Luxun was the academy's most famous teacher and there were countless experts under his tutelage. Why would he challenge Zhang Loshi? Indeed, the petty actions Zhang Xuan was doing behind Loshi had incurred his wrath, and he had decided to teach him a lesson. I will be leaving the war letter here. Pass it to him later if you all dare not to accept the challenge. Then admit defeat earlier and head to Loshi's classroom to apologize to him, otherwise, prepare to be shamed. Zihong threw the war letter onto the table and turned around to leave. Hold it right there. Before he could exit the classroom, Zheng Yang dashed forward and blocked his path. You kicked the doors to our classroom and spoke of Zhang Loshi so disrespectfully. Apologize, or don't blame me for being discourteous. A student had the responsibility to guard the honor of his teacher. This fellow was without a sliver of respect for their teacher. How could they allow him to do as he pleased, wanting to leave right after dumping that war letter? You want me to apologize? You need to have the capabilities for it first. Sneering coldly, Zihong looked at him contemptuously and sent a kick at him. Zheng Yang's skill with the spear was incredible, but his punching and kicking mastery was severely lacking. Furthermore, as his cultivation level was beneath that of the other party, before he could even react, he was kicked squarely in his chest and flew backwards, crashing heavily onto the ground. Audacious. Zhao Ya's face warped in anger with a roar. She charged forward. Just like Zihong, she was Jutsu Realm Pinnacle as well. However, her fighting prowess was slightly inferior to the other party. After trading a few blows, she was struck on her shoulder and retreated backwards, after which, Wang Ying and Yuan Tao also charged forward. However, since even Zhao Ya, who was the strongest of them all, wasn't a match for him, how could they stand up against him? In a short moment's time, the four of them had sustained some injuries. They were enraged by the other party's actions, but they were helpless to do anything. They might have learned quite a few profound theories from Zhang Ziyuan, but due to the lack of time, they still weren't a match for one who was placed fourth in the entrance examination. A bunch of trash. After defeating the crowd, Zihong flung his sleeves and said, "This is just a small punishment." He should have thought of this possibility when he challenged Lelouch. Tell him, if he doesn't dare to agree, hurry up and apologize. Otherwise what? Before he could finish his words, a faint word echoed from the doorway. Along with Liu Yang, Zhang Ziyuan walked into the classroom. Otherwise, regardless of whether Zhang Ziyuan was a trash or not, he was a teacher as a student of the academy. He wasn't someone he could insult. Even though Zhang Ziyuan had yet to fly into rage, Zihong cowered backwards, gritting his teeth. He harumphed. Otherwise, prepare to lose in shame in the teacher evaluation. It is not your place to determine whether I would lose or win. Return and tell Luxun that I had accepted his war letter. Zhang Ziyuan waved him away. Actually, he was a little dismal as well. After expending much effort to coax Huang Yu and Bai Aixun to leave, he had intended to continue the lessons for a bit more. Yet, before he could enter the classroom, he heard the bellowing of this fellow. Luxun had challenged him. You have a few hundred students under you. It is just a single Wang Yan who is coming to my lessons to listen in by the side. Surely you don't need to make such a big fuss out of it. Furthermore, even if you wanted to dispatch a student to send a war letter, you should at least choose someone reliable. This fellow, despite being a junior, he was acting so arrogantly. If not in consideration for my identity, I would have extinguished his life with a single slap. If not so, do you think that I would allow him to be acting so snobbishly here? That's for the best. Then farewell. Zihong prepared to leave. Wait. Zheng Yang struggled forward. He looked anxiously at Zhang Ziyuan. Zhang Loshi, not only did he speak disrespectfully towards you and smashed our door, he even attacked us. If we were to allow him to leave like this, wouldn't others just see us as easy targets in the future? Why? That thrashing wasn't sufficient for you. Despite being weak, you sure speak so arrogantly, you damned brat. With his head held up high, Zihong's gaze swept across Zheng Yang, Zhao Ya and the others scornfully before sneering. Just this shabby classroom and these few students. I don't care if that door really means anything much after all. Do you think anyone would secretly listen into your lessons? Stop dreaming. Besides, you all would need more capable than that to keep me here. I will stand here, and if any of you think they're sufficiently skilled, come at me. At which, he paused for a moment before clasping his hands towards Zhang Ziyuan. Zhang Loshi, as a teacher, surely you wouldn't stoop down to the level of attacking a student. Teachers had their own pride as well. If he were to really attack a student, he would be looked down by the others. This was also what the saying soldiers against soldiers, generals against generals meant. Even if a general were to defeat a small soldier, it wouldn't be something honorable for him. Calculating that it was unlikely Zhang Ziyuan would make a move on him and that none of his students was a match for him, he was fearless. Zhang Loshi, seeing Zihong behaving so arrogantly, the faces of Zhao Ya, Zheng Yang and the others paled. They clenched their fists tightly together and an urge to charge forward and bash him surged through them. However, they also knew that they weren't a match for Zihong. They had already fallen tragically in defeat previously. They would only make a shame out of themselves if they were to continue making a move against him. You want to teach him a lesson? Ignoring that conceited fellow, Zhang Ziyuan turned to look at his students. Yes. All of them nodded their heads simultaneously. Seeing their expression, Zhang Ziyuan casually waved his hand. Then, with a serious expression, he said, no matter what, he is Leloshi's student. It would be hard for me to account to him if he were to die. How about this, Yuan Tao? Your strength is the weakest, and you have good self-control. Go and beat him up into a pighead and have him compensate for our door while you are at it. Remember to hold back. Also, during the fight, you must remember to play fairly and not to go overboard. Don't wound the camaraderie you have as fellow students. Chapter 84, Pummeling Zihong, 1. Upon hearing Zhang Ziyuan-Loshi's words, Zheng Yang and the others were on the verge of tears. Teacher, can't you tell? We aren't afraid of you being unable to account for the matter if we were to beat him to death, but that we are unable to match up to him. Yet, you still went on and chose Yuan Tao to fight in our stead. He is still at Fighter 1 Dan primary stage. How do you expect him to defeat his pinnacle expert before us? Beat me up into a pighead and compensate for your door? Ha ha. Zihong laughed so hard that he almost failed to catch his breath. He knew what the level of strength the others were at when they crossed blows, especially for Yuan Tao, the one who scored the worst in the entrance examination. Yet, he dispatched him out to beat him up into a pighead. He had long heard that Zhang Loshi was terrible at teaching, but he didn't expect his eye of discernment would be so terrible as well. After which, with a trace of mock in his eyes, he declared, "All right, if any of you can defeat me, not only will I pay for your door, I will compensate him with 1,000 gold coins." As the saying went, the poor studied while the rich trained for Zihong to possess formidable strength at such a young age. This showed the wealth his family possessed. 1,000 gold coins wasn't a small sum, but it was still something he could take out easily. "You will compensate anyone who defeats you?" Zhang Xuan asked. "Of course." With both of his hands behind his back, Zihong sneered coldly with a smug look on his face. They have just crossed blows, and these people wouldn't be able to defeat him even if they were to cultivate for another decade. "Your time to earn money has come." Zhang Xuan waved his hand looking at his students. He said, "Yuan Tao, it would be best for you to make a move first. Remember teacher's words, go easy with your blows." Yuan Tao's face knitted into lumps. This fellow is so powerful that even Zhao Yuxiaji was unable to defeat him. How could I fight against him? If I say that you can win, you will win. Knowing what he was thinking about, Zhang Xuan walked up to the podium and sat on the chair. "That is because you are my students. You are all Zhang Xuan's students." Zhang Xuan's students? Upon hearing these words, Zihong burst into laughter once more. The name of Zhang Xuan Loshi is indeed immense, almost rivaling with that of Luxun Loshi, but that's an notoriety all right. I might find it difficult to win against the students of other teachers, but your students. Zihong's face was filled with disdain. While he was chuckling scornfully, Yuan Tao jolted. Hot blood surged through his body and the bitter look on his face disappeared. That's right, despite the incredible capabilities of Zhang Loshi, he is being mocked at this very instant as his student. It is my responsibility to safeguard his honor. Even if it means my death, I mustn't allow him to be scorned by others. At this point, zeal sprouted in his heart and he no longer felt fear. Thus, he stepped forward, ready to make a move against him. "Don't rush." Seeing that he was about to rush over, Zhang Xuan waved his hand once more to stop him. "Why? Does Zhang Loshi intend to go back on his words?" Zihong snickered. "Go back on my words?" Zhang Xuan shook his head. "You are overthinking it. Yuan Tao is too incredible. It wouldn't look good on me if he were to kill you accidentally. How about this? Yuan Tao, come over. I will teach you 3 basic punching moves." 3 basic punching moves? Yuan Tao and the others were perplexed over what this teacher of theirs was trying to do. A last-minute training? Learning battle techniques right now? I'm afraid that it's too late. Zihong was filled with contempt. What kind of joke is this? Every single battle technique requires countless hours of practice, training for days and nights, enduring the heat and cold, and only then will one be accomplished in it. Do you think that you can make them triumph over me by teaching them something at the last moment? Dream on. Teacher. Yuan Tao had the same thoughts as well. He walked forward hesitantly and reflected. On his face was confusion. Yuan Tao was truly unable to comprehend the rationale behind Zhang Loshi's actions. Assuming that Zhang Xuan wanted to help them redress their grievances, his choice of sending Yuan Tao forward would only embarrass them further if he were to lose against Zihong. Yuan Tao, trust our teacher. He must have an idea in mind for him to say such words. Liu Yang had witnessed the happenings in the Enlightenment trial with his own eyes. He knew how formidable this notorious Zhang Loshi in front of them was and he had complete trust in him. He was able to help someone break through within 10 minutes for what that would have taken the other party half a year with such capabilities. What else could he possibly be incapable of? Alright then. Hearing those words, Yuan Tao clenched his jaws. Since he had been beaten up a while ago, the worst situation that could get was for him to be beaten up once more anyway. He had a thick skin and was resilient to beatings, so there was nothing for him to fear. The few of you should come over to learn it as well. It will help you all win the bet later on. Zhang Xuan looked at Zhao Ya and the others. Yes. The 5 of them walked over. Look closely. This is the first move. Stretching apart his 5 fingers, Zhang Xuan's left hand grabbed at the empty air before him. The movement was so simple that even ordinary humans could comprehend and execute it. Needless to say, them, who were well versed in martial arts, the second move. Without a pause in his actions, Zhang Xuan sidestepped from the left to the right. The third move. With his right hand clenched into the shape of a fist, he sent a downward punch towards the other party's chest. Withdrawing his fist, he straightened his posture. Zhang Loshi, is that all? Seeing that there weren't any more movements to it, everyone was dumbfounded. Zhang Loshi, you must be joking. These 3 moves are as trashy as the fighting methods of those ruffians outside. There isn't a single depth to them at all. We can achieve victory with these 3 moves? Are you sure you aren't joking? Zhao Ya and the others could feel tears welling in their eyes. Even Zihong had his eyes widened in complete circles. He felt as though the world had gone insane. You declared that your students will beat me up into a pighead, so I thought that you will teach them some profound moves. What the heck is this toy? You call this battle technique? Furthermore, when you were teaching them, you didn't even try to conceal them from my sight. Teaching such trashy moves in front of me. Do you take me for a corpse? Alright, these 3 moves are extremely simple, so you all should have comprehended them already. Yuan Tao, go as long as you use them well. Defeating this fellow isn't a problem. Zhang Xuan ushered him over. Yuan Tao's face was filled with bitterness. He knew that he wasn't a reliable person, but what Zhang Loshi had just taught them was even more unreliable. He wouldn't even use these 3 moves in his usual fights against others because they were too lousy. There was not a single depth behind them at all. Even a dog could dodge those easily, not to mention a human. Go. Zhang Xuan's face darkened. Yes. Gritting his teeth, with the emotions of a brave warrior charging to his death, Yuan Tao walked over to Zhu Hong and declared, let's get on with it. Are you sure you want to fight with me? Zhu Hong looked at him as though he was looking at a fool. Truly eccentric teachers and students. If you could defeat me after learning 3 farmer brawling techniques, I should just kill myself. ignoring the other party. Yuan Tao, who was already prepared to be pummeled, roared and lunged forward. There was no depth to the techniques he was using at all, and there wasn't much difference between his fighting style and those ruffians in the alleys. He didn't use the movements Zhang Xuan had just taught him. In his perspective, since he was going to be beaten up, it was best for him to not to make a fool of himself. You are courting death. With a cold sneer, Zihong took a step back, dodging the other party's offense at the same time. He pushed him with his palm, flying straight out. Yuan Tao crashed onto the floor. However, due to his thick skin, he didn't feel any pain from the fall. He stood up and charged forth once more with clenched jaws. It hadn't been long since he started learning battle techniques. He didn't have time to comprehend or execute any techniques, and thus, he could only rely on the instinctive brawling techniques that he used in the past. These moves might work against those ruffians by the alley, but to Zihong, a cultivator, it was as laughable as playing house. He had already decided to fight for Zhang Xuan Loxi's honor. Even if he was beaten to death, he would not give up. In the midst of his charge to go all out against the other party, Zhang Loxi's voice rang by his ear. The poor studies while the rich trains. As long as the poor has books, regardless of their condition, they are able to study. In fact, some went as far as catching fireflies or camping outside the rich households with light at night just to cram a little more in. If they were to strike it out big, they would be able to bring riches and glory back to their province. Town on the other hand, to learn martial arts, one has to first find a capable teacher. Furthermore, they would need money to feed themselves correctly to strengthen their body as well. Chapter 85. Pummeling Zihong. 2. Zenki Telepathy. You fool, use the 3 moves that I have just taught you. Execute the first 2 moves inversely, use your right hand and right foot instead of your left hand and left foot. Execute the last move as it is, just change the fist into a finger strike and strike at the spot 3 inches lower. Remember, it has to be 3 inches, it mustn't be any more and or any less. One had to be at least fighter 5 down to use Zenki Telepathy. Zhang Loxi's telepathy caused Yuan Tao's body to jolt somehow. He felt inclined to trust him. Let's just do it. Things are already bad as it is anyway. Without time to think too deeply into it, Yuan Tao decided to just go through with it. After all, it wasn't like he had any other ideas. Thus, without any hesitation, he did as the voice commanded him to. As a cultivator, switching a left-hand movement to the right was an extremely simple task. That left-hand grab turned into a right-hand grab, causing Zihong to be taken aback. He tilted his head to dodge it and sent a punch back at him. However, before his fist could even reach Yuan Tao, the latter had already sidestepped from the right to the left, dodging his attack. Crap. He is using the inverse version of the technique. Zihong immediately understood what is going on. Thus, he quickly withdrew his hands to cover his face. Previously, the third blow was a downward punch since his techniques were inversed. This move would be an uppercut instead. Furthermore, Zhang Xuan had said earlier to beat him up into a pig head. He reacted extremely quickly and his movements were swift. However, it was a pity that Yuan Tao's third move wasn't inversed. It was still a downward motion, and furthermore, it was aimed 3 inches below what Zhang Xuan had shown earlier. Before Zihong could even react, he felt a stabbing pain at his waist and his entire body went numb. This is bad. He struck my Mingman. How did he know where my Mingman is? Zihong's face turned deathly white. He had carefully guarded the fact that his cultivation Mingman was in his waist from others previously. The 2 inverse movements used by Yuan Tao made him instinctively think of protecting his own face. Never would he have thought that the other party's true motive lied here. The moment his Mingman was struck, his entire body went stiff as though he was paralyzed. This is a good opportunity. Seeing Zihong's body go stiff, no matter how foolish Yuan Tao could be, at this moment, he knew that he had struck the other party's Mingman. After yelling excitedly, he charged over. He would be a fool if he didn't exploit such a god-sent opportunity. Bang 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 bang. At this moment, the techniques of the alley ruffians that should have never reached Zihong landed like torrential rain on Zihong's face before he could recover. His vision went dark. Yuan Tao's massive punch had sent him to the floor. At this moment, his years of experience brawling gave him the upper hand without much hesitation. He leapt over and sat heavily on the other party's chest. His 2 fists smashed violently onto the other party's face. Recovering from his numbness, upon seeing a fatty crushing his body and striking his fist, Zihong felt so dismal that he was about to vomit blood. He was an apprentice of Luxun Loxi, an expert who was in the 4th place in the entrance examination, yet, at this moment, he was being beaten up by the fellow who was last in the entrance examinations. He felt as though he was going mad. Scram. He tried to push the other party away, but the other party is simply too heavy, as though a tiny mountain. No matter how much effort he put into his arms, the other party didn't budge in the least. Furthermore, his fists were as hard as rocks and they smashed down on him relentlessly. Before he can finish his words, he felt his mouth getting more and more swollen as though a bun, and quite a few of his teeth had fallen off as well. Are my eyes deceiving me? Zhao Yan and the rest were flabbergasted by the sight before them. They had experienced Zihong's strength a moment ago and they had confirmed that even they were not a match for him. Yet, Yuan Tao, the weakest of them all, was about to achieve victory against him at this moment. When did he become so incredible? However, the most shocking thing of all was that their teacher's 3 moves actually worked. Enough. Yuan Tao, I have already said that beating him up into a pig head is enough. Don't kill him. Upon seeing Zihong losing his human appearance under Yuan Tao's frenzied punching, Zhang Xuan hurriedly stepped in to stop him. No matter what, he was an envoy sent over by Luxun. It wasn't appropriate for them to go too far. How awkward the situation would be if he were to be crippled under his pummeling. Other teachers, even the elders, would have to contemplate for a long moment before they could teach their students how they could counter their opponents. After all, a battle was constantly changing and evolving. However, Zhang Xuan was different. Possessing the Library of Heaven's Path, he was able to know in advance what battle techniques the other party would execute and what responses the other party would come up with. As such, through exploiting the flaws in their techniques, he was able to come up with a strategy to counter them even before the battle begins. Even though Yuan Tao's strength paled much in comparison to Zihong's, if he were to know the other party's Mingmen and make preparations in advance, defeating him was an easy feat. Yes. After sending a few more fists at his face, Yuan Tao felt the anger he had accumulated being vented out. Only then did he stand up and get off the Zihong's chest. At this moment, Zihong was already no different from a pighead. His eyes were swollen red, and his entire face had bloated up. His dignified look from before had disappeared without a trace. "You are despicable." Struggling up, Zihong gritted his teeth and glared at Yuan Tao. In his view, this fatty must have been putting on a show. He intentionally feigned weakness so as to put him off his guard, before doing a sudden assault to achieve victory. Damn it. Despicable? I am despicable. What about it? Do you want to give it another go? Yuan Tao didn't care about whether the other party thought if he was despicable or not at this moment. He was still immersed in the exhilaration from bashing the other party up and stared back at him shamelessly. Seeing his fearlessness, Zihong's complexion turned awful. Even so, he dared not to agree to his challenge. This fatty obviously knew where his Mingmen was. If he were to happen to strike it once more, he would just be beaten up again. Just as he was in a dilemma, Chang Loxi's words echoed in his ear. "All right, you have already left the other party in such a state, Yuan Tao. You should give it a rest." Chang Yuan had a stern expression on his face. Good. Upon hearing those words, Zihong heaved a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to say some pleasantries and leave the classroom, he heard Chang Loxi speaking once more. "Zhen Yang, didn't you want to give it a try just now? Go on." "Ah?" Zihong was taken aback. "Didn't you stop him so that I can leave? Why are you asking others to get a go on me?" After a temporary pause, a gleam of ruthlessness flashed across his eyes. "It's fine this way as well." Previously, that Zhen Yang was the first to charge over, and given the fact that he was able to send him flying with a single kick, it was clear that his strength was subpar. Furthermore, given the experience he had with Yuan Tao, he should be fine as long as he guarded himself against the inversion, the three moves. Besides, after getting pummeled so tragically, how could he account the situation after returning without repaying the favor back to them? At this point, even though he still held doubts, Zihong gritted his teeth and sneered. "Come. Fine." Zhen Yang stepped forward. Bang bang bang. The two of them started crossing blows. Zhen Yang, who was sent flying with a single kick previously, seemed as though he had eaten some incredible tonic. He flew around the field, refusing to face Zihong directly. "I dare you to fight with me face on." Zihong bellowed. Normally, even if Zhen Yang were to skirt around him, he would have the strength to catch him and defeat him. However, he was just beaten to a pulp by Yuan Tao and his body is aching tremendously. It is almost impossible for him to land a blow on a Zhen Yang, who was focusing all of his efforts on dodging his blows. "Sure." Upon replying, Zhen Yang's left hand grabbed forward, after which, he sidestepped to the right. He used the first move as it is, inverting only the second move, after which, before the other party could react to the abrupt changes, he used his finger as a sword and jabbed straight at Zihong's waist. Chapter 86, Pummeling Zihong. 3. I knew you would react like this. Knowing that his three techniques would either be as it is or inverted, Zihong was well prepared in reacting to both scenarios instantaneously. As the one who was the fourth in the academy's entrance examination, he had undergone all kinds of major and minor battles. He might have let his guard down towards such a superficial technique, which allowed the enemy to get the better of him. However, now that he was guarded, how could the same trick possibly work again? Sneering coldly in his mind, he deflected Zhen Yang's finger stab with his right hand, thwarting the enemy's attempt to strike his Mingmen. Just at the moment he was about to counterattack, he noticed that Zhen Yang's attack below was actually a feint, and another fist was already right before him, aiming straight at his face. Peng! Before he could even react, he was struck squarely by it. The heck? How can you be so despicable? Retreating 2 steps consecutively, Zihong's tears flowed down his face. Zhen Yang's fist was much more formidable than Yuan Tao's. With a single fist, Zihong was already on the verge of fainting. Despicable? There is no such thing as despicable in the middle of a battle. Zhen Yang couldn't be bothered to continue speaking with him after getting him with that single blow. He continued pushing ahead as the finger on his left hand continued to jab at Zihong's Mingmen. His other fist kept smashing down on the other party's face. The two different attacks came straight onto Zihong consecutively. There was no hesitation behind the attacks, not even the slightest pang of conscience. Every time Zihong decided to block, he realized that one of them was a feint. After a few went past his guard, his face had swelled up even further and his vision went blurry. He felt so frustrated and at the same time, stifled that he was on the verge of puking blood. Too shameless. Even if you all know where my Mingmen is, there should be no need for you all to constantly assault it, right? It is just like continuously checking a king in chess. Is there a point to it? Where's your sportsmanship? My face is already swollen to such an extent, and yet you still smash on it mercilessly. Didn't you speak about playing fairly in the duel? Where is the fairness? Where is the justice? You still dare to say not to go overboard, not to wound the camaraderie among fellow students. Where the hell is your boundary of going overboard? Stop. Knowing that he might die if he continued on like this, Zihong could only suppress the pain he felt in his heart and hurriedly withdrew from the fight. I admit defeat. There was no other choice for him than to admit defeat. The other party knew where his Mingmen was, and the crux of it all was that his opponent had no decency at all, attacking his weak point over and over again. How could he possibly cope with it? If he wasn't injured, he could have escaped his attacks by utilizing his movement techniques and seeking for another opportunity to counterattack. However, given how he could barely squint through the slits of his swollen eyes, if this were to go on, he might very well die here. It is good that you admitted defeat, Zhou Ya. It's your turn, Zhang Yuan said. Please enlighten me. Zhou Ya walked over without even giving the other party time to react. She immediately attacked him frenziedly. Her attack routine was no different from Zhen Yang's, striking either at Zihong's Mingmen or his face. Zihong cried, "All right, Wang Ying, give it a try as well." after admitting defeat once more. Even before he had the time to speak, Wang Ying walked over, after which, Liu Yang. Very quickly, each of Zhang Loxi's 5 students had pummeled him once at this time. Zihong's eyes were truly narrowed to only that of a slit, making him not much different from a blind person. Alright, hurry up and pay up 1,000 for each of us here, and taking into account the cost of the door as well, a total of 10,000. Yuan Tao walked forward. 10,000? There are only 5 of you here, how can it possibly add up to 10,000? Zihong was about to go insane. Our door costs 5,000. Yuan Tao declared. 5,000? Zihong's tears streamed freely down his face. 100 gold coins can probably be exchanged for 5 of these broken doors. And yet you are claiming 5,000 gold coins from me as reparation fee? Even scammers don't scam mothers like that. It's fine if you don't want to pay Zhang Loxi, the few of us would still like to spar with this expert who was placed fourth in the entrance examination. I hope that teacher can grant our request. Zheng Yang said. Alright, but you mustn't go overboard when sparring among fellow students. Zhang Xuan nodded his head seriously. Mustn't go overboard? Forget it, there's no need for it. I will pay for it. Is that enough? Hearing Zhang Loxi replying with the words he said a moment ago, the edges of Zhu Hong's mouth twitched. How could he possibly dare to retort at a time like this? He quickly retrieved $10,000 notes over. He could feel his heart bleeding as he watched the other party take the notes from his hands. He might be from a wealthy family, but 10,000 gold coins were around what he had saved throughout these years. For him to lose all of his fortunes here because of this war letter, as though afraid that he might be pummeled to death, Zihong swiftly escaped after paying the sum. A moment ago, he charged in here arrogantly, acting as though he was superior to everyone else, yet never would he have expected that he would be beaten to such a state. Teacher. The moment Zihong left, Zheng Yang, Yuan Ya and the others stared at their Zhang Loxi, who was sitting at the center of the room, with eyes filled with reverence. The main reason why they were able to defeat Zihong was thanks to the 3 movements that he had imparted them, to allow them to defeat a stronger adversary with just a few casual pointers. It was as though he knew what kinds of battle techniques the other party would use. How did he manage to achieve such an incredible feat? Liu Loxi, do you think that Zhang Xuan will accept your challenge? Elder Hong Hao chuckled as he stroked his beard. Now that Luxun Loxi has made a move, Zhang Xuan is surely in for a ride of misfortune. It is just a matter of time before his students are taken over, leaving him without a student under his tutelage once more. It doesn't matter whether he accepts it or not if I don't show him the consequences of stealing my students. How can I, Luxun, uphold my dignity in Hongshan Academy? Luxun Loxi harumphed coldly. That's right. Elder Hong Hao nodded his head just as he was about to continue speaking. He saw a fellow with a completely swollen face, similar to that of a pig, walking in. Liu Loxi, please redress my grievances. The moment the person walked in, he started to bawl. You are. Luxun was a little startled by the unfamiliar visitor. I am Zhu Hong. The visitor took another 10,000 points of damage. Zihong? Didn't I just send you to deliver the war letter? How did you land yourself in such a state? Hearing the other party identifying himself, Luxun took a closer glance and found certain traces of Zhu Hong on the other party's face. Surprised, he couldn't help but ask. How did you get into such a state just by sending a war letter? I was beaten up. Zhu Hong's tears gushed down from his eyes. Zhang Xuan actually paid no regards to his identity as a teacher and attacked you? Luxun's face suddenly darkened. He abruptly stood up and a powerful aura burst forth within the classroom. He had already opened dozens of acupoints and was a true Blue Pixie realm expert. No wonder he was a star teacher. His strength was already befitting for the position of an elder within the academy. Zihong was the 4th strongest student among the freshmen, as assessed during the entrance examination. Even though this ranking system wasn't completely indicative of his fighting prowess, it still reflected his exceptional ability among the freshmen. There were no veteran students under Zhang Xuan's tutelage. The only one who could have possibly left him in such a state was Zhang Loxi himself. It's the students under his tutelage. Zhang Loxi didn't have a move. Zihong's face blushed crimson in embarrassment. Student? You mean Zhao Ya, Zheng Yang and the rest? Since Luxun had already challenged the other party, he sent some students out to look into the students under Zhang Xuan and realized that the students under him in this semester were, surprisingly, not that bad. They ganged up together against you. That isn't right. Their placings in the entrance examinations weren't too bad, but I have already guided you in your training personally. Your cultivation is just a step from breaking through into the next realm. Even if they were to gang up on you, they shouldn't be a match for you. The strength of Zhao Ya and the others weren't too bad, but this Zihong was significantly stronger than them these 2 days. Luxun had spent quite a bit of effort on him as well in terms of individual fighting ability. There shouldn't be anyone beneath Fighter 2 Dan who should be a match for him. Even if the few of them were to gang up against him, Zihong should still be more than a match for them. How did he get beaten up to such a state in a short moment's time? Chapter 87, Is he really the worst teacher? Initially, they weren't a match for me when they ganged up on me. However, at this moment, Zhang Loxi came in. He taught them 3 movements and somehow, every one of them seems to have powered up. Suddenly the first one to fight me was Yuan Tao. Zihong explained everything that had just happened previously. Once he even demonstrated the 3 movements which Zhang Xuan had imparted them. Hearing his story and looking at the 3 movements Zihong demonstrated to them, Luxun and Elder Hong Hao stared at one another in disbelief. They doubted if their ears were playing tricks on them, and their complexion looked as awful as one afflicted by constipation. You mean to say the Yuan Tao who was the last in the entrance examination? Just these 3 moves and yet you weren't a match for him? You must be jesting with us. The results of the investigation that just came in earlier contained Yuan Tao's information as well. His parents died when he was young, and he had never learned any battle techniques or cultivation techniques. The only strength he had was his thick skin, granting him powerful defensive abilities. Even so, he scored the last in the entrance examination, thus clearly indicating his level of ability as compared to his peers. How can someone like that defeat an expert like you who was ranked 4th? Do you have to be so exaggerated? Furthermore, after taking a look at those 3 movements, they had confirmed that they were trash. Could those movements even be considered a battle technique? Even if the other party were to use it inversely, swapping their left and right, it should mean nothing at all. He despicably. Zihong recounted the happenings in the battle detailedly with a pained look. Looks like your Mingman was exposed. Those 3 movements were only a distraction to attract your attention. Their main goal was your Mingman. Luxun came to a realization after the other party recounted the entire incident. This student of his was too careless. Mingman was the location where the strength of a cultivator gathers. It was the core of a cultivator's strength, and one had to guard it properly for him to allow his Mingman to be seen through so easily. He was truly too negligent. Finding an opponent's Mingman didn't mean that one can defeat him with 100% possibility after all. Battles weren't just simple math, it involved one's reaction speed and ability to adapt to sudden situations. However, when 2 people of similar cultivation level were to fight with one another, it was still a dangerous scenario if the opponent were to locate one's Mingman. It is impossible for those students of his to find your Mingman and exploit that flaw of yours. It seems that this Zhang Xuan Loshi isn't simple initially. I thought that it would be a simple and meaningless win. However, from the looks of it, things aren't as they seem on the surface. Interesting. As expected of the Academy's star teacher, Luxun swiftly analyzed the crux of the issue. Mingman is a weakness of all cultivators. Usually, one would guard it properly, making it difficult for others to locate it. Furthermore, even if one were to locate an opponent's Mingman, if one doesn't have the sufficient strength to stand up against one's opponent, it is still difficult for one to achieve a victory. It is as though giving an ordinary human a dagger. Even though the human knows that the other party would die with a single stab through his heart, he is still unable to defeat a boxing expert. If the few students of Zhang Xuan could see through his Mingman beforehand, they would have won against Ziyang from the very start. It is apparent that Zhang Xuan had told them of it in secret. However, it matters not. I will find a way for you to break through to fight a 2-dan. Now once you succeed, your Mingman will move, and by then, you will be able to exact your vengeance. Waving his hand grandly, Luxun consoled him. A cultivator's Mingman didn't stay at the same location depending on one's cultivation technique. Cultivation realm and battle technique, their Mingman would be in different locations. At this moment, Zihong's Mingman was by his waist. Once he broke through fighter 1-dan, his Mingman would move to another point. By then, he would be able to completely neglect those petty tricks of theirs. It was rumored that those who cultivate an incredible cultivation technique, upon reaching a certain powerful realm, would not have any Mingman or weakness. It was impossible to find even if one were to jab every single spot of their body. Yes. Zihong nodded his head. A while later, I will look for Elder Shangchen to ascertain the nominal role for the competition. Cultivate properly and don't disappoint me when the time comes. I will allow you to exact vengeance with your own hands. Thank you, Lu Loshi. Motivated, Zihong regained his confidence once more. Right, Elder Hong Hao, don't you have a good relationship with Elder Shangchen? It should be much more efficient for you to deal with a trash teacher like Shangchen by knocking on the Education Bureau than looking for me. Upon recalling Elder Shangchen, Luxun couldn't help but look at him doubtfully. Back then, Elder Hong Hao was a serious contender for the position of the Academy's principal. He had amiable relations with many elders and Shangchen was one of them. Logically speaking, if he really had something against Zhang Xuan, wouldn't getting the Education Bureau to make a move be much more convenient than seeking for his assistance? Actually, it isn't convenient for the Education Bureau to make a move under such circumstances. After all, we can't forcefully pull a student away from his teacher. If we were to do so and he complains up to the teacher guild, saying that he has been oppressed, wouldn't the matter just blow big? Elder Hong Hao replied, if a student were to acknowledge a teacher by their own will, even the Education Bureau had no rights to interfere in their choices. Most importantly, in his eyes, Zhang Xuan was nothing more than a trash who had scored 0 for his teacher qualification examination. If so, was there a need to look for the head of the Education Bureau? He would be making a mountain out of a molehill. Of course. He couldn't say such words out loud, otherwise, Luxun Loshi would find his actions disrespectful. Actually, given Luxun's wits, it was likely that he had already guessed the truth. If it wasn't for 2 of his students being poached from his side, he wouldn't be bothered to interfere in these matters. Needless to say, propose a teacher evaluation against Zhang Xuan. As the both of them was in the midst of chatting, they suddenly spotted a young man walked over with widened strides. Luxun. Before the young man reached the duo, he had already shouted out Luxun's name. Oh, it's Wang Loshi. What are you doing here? Luxun smiled. The one who came was the other star teacher of the academy, Wang Zhao, the spear expert whom Zheng Yang wanted to acknowledge as his teacher. Elder Hong Hao? Upon reaching, Wang Zhao noticed Hong Hao, who was sitting beside Luxun, and bowed, after which, he hurriedly turned to look at Luxun and asked, have you heard about the happenings with the Education Bureau? Heard of what? Luxun was puzzled. You don't know about it? Elder Shangchen has been stripped of his position and is currently undergoing investigation. Wang Zhao exclaimed. The teacher guild has just passed down the orders. Elder Shangchen has been stripped of his position and is undergoing investigation? What's going on? Not only was Luxun in a state of disbelief, even Elder Hong Hao was taken aback by this sudden news. How can the head of Hongshan Academy's Education Bureau be stripped of his position and undergo investigation all of a sudden without any forewarning? It is rumored that he had oppressed a teacher and lacked impartiality in his actions. Some also say that he was unfair when conducting the Enlightenment Will trial anyway. The teacher guild had been informed of these matters and he was immediately stripped of his position. Wang Zhao said, Cao Xun had caused quite a ruckus when he applied for the Enlightenment Will trial, so quite a few teachers knew about it. Oppress? Lack impartiality? Which teacher is so formidable to be able to prompt the teacher guild to make a move and drag Elder Shangchen off his authoritative position? Luxun couldn't help but comment. Elder Shangchen might just be a head of Education Bureau, but he had a powerful backing. Several elders in the teacher guild were his friends, so overthrowing him, not to mention doing it so thoroughly, should be an extremely difficult task. Elder Hong Hao could also infer that much, and he was curious to know which influential figure it is to be capable of wielding such power. According to the rumors, it is that trash of a teacher in our academy, Zhang Ziyuan. Wang Zhao pondered for a moment before replying their doubts. Zhang Ziyuan? How is that possible? In that instant, as though their tails had been stepped on, Elder Hong Hao and Luxun leapt up simultaneously. Their eyes were widened to complete circles and they felt as though the world was going mad. Just by eating a few food, he was able to topple an established tavern with more than a decade of history behind it. Also, he was able to impel students to withdraw from the tutelage of the academy's #1 teacher. Furthermore, just casually teaching his students were able to beat the 4th-ranked freshman up into a pighead. Lastly, and the most shocking of all, he was able to topple the head of the education bureau, Shang Chen. Zhang Ziyuan, was he really the worst teacher in the academy? This phrase is an idiomatic expression that means making a big deal out of a small issue. Chapter 88, Apothecary Guild. Alright, let's stop lessons here today. When you go back, cultivate based on what I have taught you all today. I don't wish to lose in a teacher evaluation half a month later. I also wish that your thoughts are the same as me. After talking a little more about cultivation in the classroom, Zhang Ziyuan waved his hands to signal the end of the lesson. After interacting with the others these 2 days, he was gradually getting used to his profession as a teacher, and the disposition of a teacher slowly built on him. Yes, Zhang Loshi, Zhao Ya, Zhen Yang and the others clenched their fists with reddened faces. After the previous incident, they knew that Luxun Loshi had challenged Zhang Loshi and they were the stakes in this challenge. If it was 2 days ago, they would have gone insomniac over the excitement of being able to come under Lu Loshi's tutelage. However, at this moment, they were absolutely unwilling to acknowledge anyone except for Zhang Ziyuan as their teacher, even if they were beaten to death. He was able to see through the flaws on them with a single glance, treat the disabilities of Zhao Ya, Wang Ying and the others, whip out profound cultivation techniques on a whim and even helping them find Zhu Hong's Mingmen, allowing them to easily achieve a victory over him. Zhang Loshi seemed to possess a unique charm, causing them to be astonished and impressed at the same time, making it difficult for them to think of anything else. Goodbye, teacher. The few of them left the classroom. You said that Zhang Loshi was able to strike 50 fighting with a single punch? Even Beig Zunxi when I was trying to seek guidance from him? The moment they walked out of the classroom, the crowd couldn't help but to question Liu Yang about the happenings in the Enlightenment Will trial today. Liu Yang didn't hide anything and revealed everything that had happened. When the crowd heard that Zhang Loshi actually possessed the strength of a Pixie Realm expert, the astonishment in every single one of their eyes could not possibly be faked in that instant. Their eyes glowed in reverence. When they heard about the shameless doings of the Education Bureau, every single one of them felt so indignant for Zhang Ziyuan that they were about to erupt from the rage welling in them. Everyone, Luxun Loshi's challenge is actually a good opportunity for us to cleanse Zhang Loshi's reputation. After recounting the happenings in the Enlightenment Will Tower, Liu Yang scanned the faces of his fellow peers before continuing. Thus, I hoped that all of us would train properly this half a month so as to win glory and honor for our teacher, as well as to forge a reputation for ourselves. Indeed, Zhang Loshi is noble and magnanimous, so he might not be bothered with the slander of these despicable people. However, as his students, we have the responsibility to right his reputation. Zhao Ya's beautiful eyes were twinkling, and a resolute gleam could be seen within it. I agree as well. The dense Wang Ying also gritted her teeth in anger. Zhang Loshi had healed her legs for her, even specially creating a cultivation technique for her. Even if she were to crush her bones into powder, it would be hard for her to repay this gratitude. Count us in. Yuan Tao and Zheng Yang stepped forward as well. It's a promise then. This half a month, we will give our all into our training. Then, during the freshman tournament, we will make those who looked down on Zhang Loshi see unwavering determination reflected in Liu Yang's eyes. With a slow but powerful voice, he said that his students are the best. The battle half a month later, unaware of his students' blazing morale, at this moment, Zhang Ziyuan was seated in the staff room. A frown so deep that lumps formed could be seen on his face. He didn't worry much about Zhao Ya and Wang Ying given their strong foundations, accompanied with the cultivation techniques that he has imparted them. Their strength would definitely make a big leap half a month later. As for Zheng Yang and Liu Yang, they possessed acceptable talent and they were ambitious as well. As long they were properly guided, it wasn't a problem for their strength to soar. However, Yuan Tao remained a factor of anxiety for him. This fellow is a wandering cultivator. He has no backing or connections whatsoever. In fact, he never really came into contact with cultivation techniques before, so it would be difficult for him to improve swiftly within half a month, unless his ancient emperor bloodline awakens. A thought flashed through his mind. He had checked Yuan Tao's condition with the library at Heaven's Path a few days ago. He had confirmed that he possesses the ancient emperor bloodline as long as it was awakened. Regardless of whether it was Yuan Tao's level of cultivation, his defense or speed, they would all rise exponentially. This seemed to be the only plausible method for his strength to rise swiftly. But how can the emperor bloodline be awakened? The answer of his problem brought about another problem. The Emperor bloodline was a type of bloodline passed down from the ancient times and it was incomparably valuable. There were sporadic records of it and most of those who know of it only knew of its name. Most probably, there wasn't a single person in Tangxuan Kingdom who knew how to awaken it. There are normally 3 methods to awaken a person's unique constitution. Firstly, continue training the conventional method. Once one reaches a certain level, it is possible for their unique constitution to be awakened. This is the most reliable but lengthiest method. In fact, most people died even before they got a chance to awaken their potential. Secondly, one can also check the nature of the unique constitution and consume a pill corresponding to the attribute of the body with powerful medicinal effects. There is a certain level of possibility for one to successfully awaken their unique constitution. Thirdly, forcefully awakening one's potential through special experiences, such as death or poison. There was an expert whose unique constitution awoke after his body was slashed over 70 times consecutively. There was also another one who, after being poisoned, bled from the 7 apertures of his body after losing his breath for 3 days. His unique constitution awoke and he successfully resurrected, with a jolt in his mind. A book regarding unique constitutions floated into his mind and a few methods of awakening them were written on it. After taking a look at it, dark lines appeared on Zhang Xuan's face. The first and the second method is still acceptable, but what the heck is the third method? Either death or poison? What if one fails to awaken their unique constitution after being consecutively stabbed 70 times or consuming lethal poison and bleeding from their 7 apertures? If so, wouldn't they really die for sure? Looks like only the second method is viable. He rubbed his globular. The third method was definitely out of question. On the other hand, with only half a month, the first method could not be relied on either. After thinking about it, it seemed that only the second method was the feasible one. Since that's the case, I should head over to the Apothecary Guild to take a look. Perhaps I might find some suitable pills to awaken Yuan Tao's Emperor bloodline and Zhao Ya's pure yin body. Standing up, he walked out of the staff room. If Zhao Ya and Yuan Tao were to awaken their unique constitutions, it was definite that their cultivation realm would soar. Almost all of the occupations of the upper 9 paths have their own alliance organization, such as the Teacher Guild, Blacksmith and Appraiser Guild, Formation Master Guild, Beast Tamer Guild and such. The apothecaries were no different as well. As one of the unique occupations in the continent, even though apothecaries paled slightly in comparison to master teachers, they were still esteemed standing, and it was an occupation many looked forward to. After all, there wasn't a single cultivator who didn't want to break through his current realm, and didn't get injured most of the time. A cultivator would require the help of an apothecary to solve these problems of theirs. The pills that they forged boost the medicinal properties of the herbs, thus creating a greater effect on the cultivators. That's precisely the reason why the Apothecary Guild was extremely crowded every day. Crowds of people would gather in there for inquiries and procurement of medicine. Zhang Xuan's previous self had never been there before. However, as one of the greatest power within the kingdom, he still knew the rough position of it. After walking along the streets for an hour, he arrived at his destination, a magnificent building, as though a massive church. A board hung on top of the entrance, and 2 majestic words were carved on it: Apothecary Guild. Without much hesitation, Zhang Xuan walked in. A vast lounge appeared before him the moment he entered. The interiors of the Apothecary Guild was bustling with people walking to and fro. I should either inquire with an apothecary or look up books on pills if I want to know what kinds of pills can awaken the Emperor bloodline and pure yin body. Zhang Xuan's main goal for coming here was to look into this matter rather than to purchase pills. There were only 2 methods for him to fulfill his objective here. However, he didn't know a single person in the Apothecary Guild, and it wasn't suitable for him to ask about it from others. In fact, even if he were to have an acquaintance here, it was unlikely for the other party to have heard of it. After all, Emperor bloodline and pure yin body were extremely rare constitutions. On the other hand, looking for a specific information among countless books might be like searching for a needle in the middle of a deep ocean for the others. But for Zhang Xuan, who possesses the cheat known as the Library of Heaven's Path, the situation was vastly different. Thus, making up his mind, he walked forward to the reception of the Apothecary Guild. Chapter 89, Wenxiu's Rage. Wenxiu was a receptionist at the front desk of the Apothecary Guild. Her greatest wish was to become an apothecary. However, it was a pity that she was lacking in talent, and even after numerous tries, she still had yet to pass the examination to become an apprentice. Helpless, she could only work at the front desk while trying her best to study. Working as a receptionist at the front desk of the Apothecary Guild might seem like nothing, but the income was truly not bad. She would get a commission on every pill sold, and while the commission isn't a large sum, the more pills were sold, the more she would earn. Thus, her salary in a single year tends to be 6 or 7 times of those working in the same job. However, despite the generous pay, she didn't want to stay in this job for a single day longer. It wasn't because of the difficulty of the job, but rather her outer appearance. She was in her early 20s, the pinnacle of her youth and beauty. Furthermore, her parents had gifted her with a spectacular face. While it might not be top-notch, it could be considered as 1 in 100. Being beautiful should have been a blessing as long as one was a woman. One would be proud of it. However, it would be a totally different matter if the woman were to work here, often having to stand in the front lines in receiving customers. Countless young masters of distinguished families would intentionally run over here to chat her up, coming up with all kinds of ridiculous demands. There were even a few who were incredibly persistent, visiting her every single day and using every single trick in the book, leaving her incredibly annoyed. However, as a salesperson, she wasn't allowed to chase them away. If she were to do so and her pursuers claimed that they were only here to purchase pills, she would be in for a lot of trouble. Let's hope that I will not meet those shameless flies today. Muttering under her breath, she tidied up her uniform and stood at the reception with a smile. Soon afterward, a young man walked over. This young man didn't seem too old. Probably below 20. His complexion was well maintained, smooth and radiant even when compared to hers. Mister, is there anything that you need? Wenxiu flashed a business-like smile at him. Do you all sell books here? Those kind about the effects of pills that awaken unique constitutions. The young man said. The young man was Zhang Xuan. As his previous self had never been here, he didn't know how the Apothecary Guild worked, so he could only inquire at the front reception. Please head to the bookstore if you wish to purchase books. This is the Apothecary Guild. Upon hearing the other party's words, the smile Wenxiu was hanging on her face collapsed and her complexion turned awful. Even if you want to hit on me, you should be more professional about it. Asking about books at the Apothecary Guild? Why don't you buy shoes at a restaurant? No, that's not it. I am here to look for the books on the effects of pills. Such books surely cannot be found in the bookstore. Not noticing the sudden changes that have occurred with the attitude of the female receptionist, Zhang Xuan contemplated for a moment before asking again. Since you want to put on a show, I will quietly watch your monologue. With her arms akimbo, Wen Zhu's eyes emanated cold intent. Seeing the other party remaining silent to his words, Zhang Xuan thought that she did not understand his words, thus, he continued explaining. Actually, I want to look for pills that can awaken unique constitutions. However, I am unsure of the herbs that are compatible with them, so I would like to browse through some books. Do you have any of them here? I am willing to buy them off you, or else just borrowing them to take a look is fine as well. I have already said, there isn't any. Now that I'm ignoring you, you become even more aggressive? Buying books and borrowing books. Do you think that you can fool a girl with such old lines? Wen Zhu has already decided that this fellow is here to cause trouble to attract her attention. Otherwise, who would run to the apothecary guild to buy books? Wasn't he looking for a beating like this? At this moment, Zhang Xuan noticed the snappish attitude of the other party. He couldn't help but be bewildered by her queer actions. He didn't offend her, so why would she behave like this? It might be menopause. Shaking his head, he didn't allow the issue to linger in his mind. As a civilized and wise transcender, he couldn't be bothered to squabble with a woman over such a minor affair. If Wen Zhu were to know of his thoughts, she would surely be driven mad. I am just 20, okay? You are the one who is having menopause. How about this? The apothecary guild should have a book collection vault, right? Can you bring me over to take a look? Know that it was impossible to explain his way through the matter. Zhang Xuan mused for a moment and arrived at a solution. Regardless of whether it was the teacher guild or apothecary guild, they were established for the convenience of the respective occupations. Thus, it was natural for them to have a book collection vault in the buildings so that those treading on the path of these unique occupations and continue to study and improve. Even if the other party was unwilling to sell these books to him, as long as he was able to take a look around the book collection vault, he should be able to achieve his goals. Book collection vault? You still wish to enter the book collection vault? Seeing how the request of the fellow before her was getting more and more ludicrous, Wen Zhu spoke in a sharp tone. If you aren't here to buy pills, please leave. Why, you are banning people from entering the book collection vault. How much money does it take to enter it? It is not like I am unwilling to pay for the entry. Zhang Xuan was displeased. Was there something wrong with this woman? He was just here to inquire about some matter, and yet the other party reacted as though she had eaten gunpowder or something. Upon hearing the other party acting haughtily the way young masters of distinguished families do, viewing money as though dirt, Wen Zhu was even more repulsed. So what if you have money? Do you think that money makes the world go round? Let me tell you the truth. The Apothecary Guild does have a book collection vault, and it is split into basic and advanced tiers. Even the basic tier book collection vault requires one to be an apprentice apothecary before he is able to enter. Are you an apothecary? Or are you an apprentice apothecary? Apprentice apothecary? Zhang Xuan was stunned for a moment before coming to a realization. He didn't know much about the Apothecary Guild, but at the very least, he knew about the situation in the academy. The students have a compendium pavilion of their own, and the teachers another one of their own, and the latter required a teaching license to enter. Otherwise, if everyone was allowed to browse through as they please, then those secret manuals could no longer be referred to as such. Furthermore, browsing through them was one thing, but if a student were to fancy a cultivation technique written in one of the books and cultivate it on a whim, who could they push the responsibility to if his cultivation were to go berserk? The Apothecary Guild should be the same as well. The rationale behind splitting the book collection vault into the basic and advanced tier and limiting the access to it to only those who have reached a certain standard was to prevent people from getting greedy and only pick out bits and pieces of it to form incomplete knowledge, which could prove to be dangerous. At the same time, they could also prevent the secret manuals from leaking out. Apprentice apothecary, I am not it. But can anyone take the examinations? He was just an ordinary teacher who had never learned pill forging before. As such, it was impossible for him to be an apprentice apothecary. However, these were all just titles which one could take a test for, and to become a master teacher, he needed to accumulate even more knowledge. Examination? You wish to take the test to become an apprentice apothecary? At this moment, Wen Zhu, who was absolutely certain that the other fellow is here to hit on her, seethed in anger seeing how the other party was continuing on with his facade and even declaring his intention to take the examination to become an apprentice apothecary. She could no longer suppress her rage any further. Fine. The test is over there. I will take you over right now. Aren't you good at acting? I will bring you over right now. Let's see whether you can continue acting like this. Even though it was just an examination for an apprentice apothecary, it was similar to an assistant master teacher selection in the sense that it required one go through numerous trials, assessed on all kinds of basic knowledge. An apothecary had to know. She had already taken the test for numerous years now, only to fail dismally. Yet, you, a playboy who has never gone for any lessons for the apprentice examinations or read any books on medicinal herbs or pill forging, hope to take the test as well? What kind of joke is this? If I don't expose your fraud and humiliate you in public, you might just take me as an easy target. Wen Zhu's lips pouted as she harumphed coldly. The test is over there? Why? Chickening out? Wen Zhu sneered coldly. Great. Seeing the other party behave as though she had eaten gunpowder, Zhang Xuan shook his head just as he was about to follow behind her. He suddenly looked over with an awkward expression. Examination. What contents are tested in the apprentice apothecary examination? Do I have to read any books? Chapter 90, Examination Hall. You. It was one thing if she didn't hear those words now. Upon hearing these words, Wen Zhu felt as though someone was beating on her chest and she was on the verge of erupting. Hitting on me? I will tolerate it. Your intentional rambling? I will tolerate it as well. However, to win my favor, you should at least feign to be knowledgeable. You claim to want to be an apprentice apothecary, yet you are unaware of the basic contents that are being tested. Not even knowing what books to read, do you dare to shout those words out any louder? Why? You also don't know? Fine, I will ask someone else then. Seeing the intense movements at her chest as though it was a ventilation fan, Zhang Xuan felt a little indignant and depressed. What is wrong with this lady? If you know about it, just explain it to me. Why do you have to make a big fuss over everything as though you just had a seizure? seeing how the other party was behaving as though saying, if you don't know anything, don't confuse me. Wen Zhu almost turned insane. Fine, continue putting on your facade then. We will see in a while how you embarrass yourself. In the examination to become an apprentice apothecary, one has to remember the medicinal properties of over 100,000 of medicinal herbs, as well as the history and founding of apothecaries forcefully suppressing the rage from erupting. Wen Zhu started to explain. Apothecary was a job that involves medicinal herb if one was incapable of even identifying and differentiating the herbs. How could one forge pills? The continent was vast and boundless, there were countless medicinal herbs in it, and even though 100,000 might seem like a huge quantity, it could only be considered as the basics despite accompanying medicinal herbs their entire life. Some apothecaries were still unable to recognize quite a few of them. Needless to say, the apprentices, just these? That's simple. Where can I find books on medicinal herbs? I will take a look on them right now. Upon hearing the explanation, Zhang Xuan was taken aback by the simplicity of the examination. As long as there were books on it, the Library of Heaven's Path was able to compile books inside his head and be stored in his brain as his knowledge. As long as only these contents were tested, the examination could be considered as easy to him. After all, this was an ability much more incredible than photographic memory. Simple? The corner of Wen Zhu's mouth twitched, if not in consideration of the fact that the other party was a customer and she was only a receptionist. She would have long assaulted him. Just remembering 100,000 medicinal herbs was an extremely daunting task. Furthermore, every single medicinal herb had different traits and different reactions would arise when different medicinal herbs were mixed with a specific medicinal herb. Even though Wen Zhu self-acknowledged that she had a good memory, she was still unable to remember them all even after several years, and she would easily get confused between the different herbs during the examination. He, a playboy who only knows how to flirt with girls, actually said that the test is easy. Act. Continue acting. I'll see how you intend on wrapping up the situation later. There are books on sale at where the apprentice apothecary examination is held. Come with me. Upon coming to a conclusion that the other party was intentionally bragging to capture her attention, Wen Zhu's rage calmed down slightly. Sneering coldly, she led Zhang Xuan over. Soon, they arrived at a spacious room at the top. 2 words examination hall was written. A middle-aged man was sitting by the entrance while reading a book. The examination hall was a place where apprentice apothecaries were being tested as such. Outsiders were usually forbidden from entering the premises. This middle-aged man was also one of those who wished to become an apprentice apothecary even after persisting for over 20 years. He had still yet to succeed. Similar to Wen Zhu, he was studying alongside his work. For someone to be unable to pass the examination even after 20 years, the difficulty of the examination was clear to see. Uncle Li. Wen Zhu stopped before the middle-aged man and greeted him. You're here. Are you here to buy books or for the examination? The middle-aged man named Uncle Li raised his head and smiled. Not me, it is this Mr. over here. He says that he wishes to take the apprentice apothecary examination. Sneering coldly in her mind, Wen Zhu pointed to Zhang Xuan. Didn't you say that you want to take the examination? Fine, I will register you right now. Let's see how you intend to resolve the situation given how ignorant you are. The questions for the examination are brainstormed by the apothecaries themselves, yet you dare to charge in here despite not knowing anything at all? This is equivalent to challenging their dignity. Let's see how you cry after you incur their wrath. You wish to take the examination? The middle-aged man looked at Zhang Xuan and frowned. He had studied for 20 years and yet, he had yet to pass the examination. This fellow looked barely 18 to 19 and he intended to take the examination? Yes. Zhang Xuan nodded his head. Only when he became an apprentice apothecary could he enter the Apothecary Guild's basic tier library to browse their books without a choice. He could only give it a try. If the other two were to know of his thoughts, they would definitely spurt blood and die from excessive blood loss. All of us study every day to memorize those contents, spending several decades of efforts only to end in vain. Yet, despite not reading a single book, you intend to go for the examination, not to mention just to give it a try. Are you sure it is okay to be acting cool like this? The registration fee is 2,000 gold coins if you pass the examination. The money will be refunded to you. However, if you fail, the money will be the Apothecary Guild's. This is to prevent others from wasting resources here despite not knowing anything at all. Upon seeing him confirm his intention, the middle-aged Uncle Li mentioned the rules for the registration of the examination. All right. Zhang Xuan casually whipped out $2,000 notes and passed it over. After the treasure speculation and the incident with the scammer Yang Mo, he had earned quite a wealth. 2,000 gold coins meant nothing much to him. As expected, he is a rich playboy. Seeing him hand over the money so casually without a shred of hesitation, Wen Zhu was even more ascertain of her judgment. 2,000 gold coins if it was them, they would have to work for quite a period of time before they could whip out such a sum. This fellow was obviously doing this to catch her attention to hand over this sum of money so easily. What could he be if not a playboy? However, it was a pity that he used the money incorrectly. Not only would it not generate the effects he had intended, he would also become a laughingstock. Taking the money over, Uncle Li nodded his head and passed a personal particulars form to Zhang Xuan, after which, he said, it just happens that there is an examination that will be held today. However, there is still 4 hours before its start, so you just have to return within 4 hours. 4 hours? A trip from the academy to ward here took an entire 2 hours, so naturally, he couldn't head back now. Looking at the middle-aged man, he asked, is there any books for those taking the apprentice apothecary examination? Can I take a look at them here? You wish to do a last-moment sharpening of your knowledge? Sure. That room is full of books, so you can feel free to pick any book of your choice. However, studying 4 hours from the examination seems a little too late. As he spoke, Uncle Li pointed towards Zhang Xuan's back. Turning around to take a look, he saw a huge collection of books filling up dozens of bookshelves behind him. From the looks of it, there were at least 10,000 books over there. So many. It was no wonder that the apprentice apothecary examination wasn't easy. Just finishing these books were enough to tire a person to death. Needless to say, remember them. I will just take a casual look. I won't be buying any of it. At which Zhang Xuan walked into the room. To him, there was no point in purchasing books just by flipping through it. He was able to imprint the knowledge into the library to become his own, so there's no use in buying them. Seems like you are quite tolerant today. I will go all out with you. Let's see how long you can keep up your facade for. Seeing how the other party walking in and saying that he would take a look even after seeing so many books stacked on the bookshelves, Wen Zhu didn't leave and instead sneered coldly at his back. To tell the truth, she had seen many shameless people, but she had never seen such a shameless person. Despite not knowing anything at all, he brazenly registers himself for the apprentice apothecary examination. Not only so, he still publicly declares that he is going to study. If it wasn't to put on an act, anyone who sees the amount of book on the bookshelf would feel a little conscience-stricken upon seeing that number of books and think that it is an impossible mission. Nearly 10,000 books. It takes nearly half a day just to move them all, needless to say, to read them. Since you are so shameless, I will quietly watch by the side at how you will continue to act cool. Even if my wage today is deducted, I must see you make a fool out of yourself. Let's see how you will deal with the embarrassment 4 hours from now. Wen Zhu's wrath had been incurred quite a fair bit, and she intended to go until the end with that fellow.